Well, a very good morning once again, and thank you for joining us online. A press conference with Ambassador Khan. She certainly didn't want to leave as president of the Human Rights Council before having this conversation with you. So immediately over to Ambassador Khan for her comments, and then to you for your questions. Ambassador Khan, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Rolando, and it's a pleasure to be here. And of course, this is the final encounter with you as president of the Human Rights Council. So I'm delighted. This has been one of many discussions that I've had with you about the work of the council, our aspirations, and it's a good time really to do a post-mortem of the work that we have done this year, and to tell you what my perspectives are about how we did. So you are, of course, aware that this has been an extremely busy year for the council. We not only had to do a lot of work, but we did so in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, with all the challenges that brought with it. And in addition to that, we have had an unprecedented number of special sessions. You are aware, of course, that we've already had 4, with the 5th special session scheduled for tomorrow, and that is on the human rights situation in Ethiopia. So unfortunately, the fact that we've been so busy and the fact that we have had so much work in relation to special sessions does indicate that there is a continuing need for the work of the council, a need for the council to sit and to consider the many worrying situations around the world. And that, sadly, is true. But also true is the fact that the many demands on the council do indicate that the international community considers the council to be relevant, and that the decisions we make continue to make a difference to the way that the global community approaches violations of human rights. So on the one hand, it's unfortunate that we continue to have to deal with them, especially those which are considered to be urgent. But on the other hand, I think a clear statement of the relevance and importance of the council. I do want to say also that the visibility of the council has been very important. It is, in fact, unfortunate that perhaps there are people around the world who don't know what the council is or what it does, or how it can achieve the aims of the ordinary people on the ground, because that ultimately is the test for the effectiveness of human rights work. So in this, you have helped us to attain a much greater visibility of the council. In the stories that you write, in the accounts that you tell around the world, you tell the world about what the council does, and it's very important that you continue to do this. In this, I believe, an important role of the council, and that is to be visible and relevant, is delivered by the work of journalists and the media. Another very important goal that I had in the course of the year was to strengthen the relationship between Geneva and New York. And I did go to New York in October of this year. Last year, of course, my predecessor could not go because of the COVID-19 travel restrictions, but I was able to go. And I met with the President of the General Assembly and with the Secretary General. And both praised the Council for the fact that we continue to operate throughout during the COVID-19 conditions. And this was almost unique in the United Nations system. And so when they expressed pride in the fact that the council continued to do its work, I also obviously felt immensely proud that we were able to achieve this. In addition to this, while in New York, I took part in the President of the General Assembly's high-level panel discussion on climate action. This was a very important discussion and, of course, very well timed because it was just a few weeks before COP26. And it really did allow me to speak about the importance of putting people in the center of the conversation about climate action. In my view, you really can't approach climate action unless such action is driven by people and is also driven by policies which acknowledge the specific vulnerabilities of particular parts of the population. And when we're talking about vulnerability, we are not talking about the language of victimization. We are talking really about ensuring that those who are the most vulnerable are at the table making the decisions on how a particular country or community should approach climate change. So it was an opportunity to say all of those at the PGA's Climate Action panel discussion, and I was very pleased to take part in it. The adoption also on the same subject by the Human Rights Council of two important resolutions on the environment, one which recognized the human right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, and the second, a separate resolution to create a new mandate of the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights and Climate Change, were both vital steps in this recognition of the relationship between people and communities and climate change action. So I think that these are two important outcomes for the Human Rights Council this year, and they confirm this important nexus in this conversation. And I do have to say it has been a difficult conversation. It may well be politically correct in some parts of the world to talk about climate justice, but not in all parts of the world. And so the fact that we had so much overwhelming support for both resolutions in the Human Rights Council was really, I think, an indication that more and more countries, more and more communities, more and more people are prepared to see the nexus between human rights and climate action. In addition to this, we also had some other very, very important outcomes during the year. One, in relation to country situations, was the establishment of a special rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Afghanistan, and the special session that was held by the Council before that. These two steps were positive and gave good examples of constructive engagement with the Council. In addition to that, the Council adopted 84 resolutions, 3 decisions, and 1 President's statement in our 3 regular sessions, and of course 4 special sessions to date, with another to come. This year also the Council extended 17 special procedure and investigative body mandates, and 5 new mandates were created. To recall, among the new bodies which were created was the International Independent Expert Mechanism on Racial Justice and Equality in the context of law enforcement globally. And the July decision by the Council asked me to appoint the 3 experts to this body. And so on this note, I would like to announce to you that I have decided to appoint the following 3 individuals to serve as experts on this new body. Justice Yvonne Magoro of South Africa as the chair, Dr. Tracy Kisi of the United States of America, and Professor Juan Mendez of Argentina as the other 2 members. And these individuals bring a wealth of knowledge to the work of the Council in this context, on this very important issue. And so I'm very proud to make this announcement, and I'm quite certain that this expert mechanism is going to report in a way to the Council, which the Council will find very useful and which will help the Council to decide on future action in relation to racial justice in the context of law enforcement. If I can turn to the special session on Ethiopia. That session will commence at 10 a.m. tomorrow, and it will commence with an address by the Deputy High Commissioner for Human Rights, Nada al-Nashif. It will be followed by a representative of the Coordination Committee of the Special Procedures, and we expect the Council to take action on a draft resolution sometime in the afternoon tomorrow. Of course, the situation in Ethiopia is one of the many critical situations which have been addressed by the Council this year. And it's vital that the Council continue to focus on important issues and matters of chronic cases of human rights violations around the world. I also want to take this opportunity to tell you that the Human Rights Council's Universal Periodic Review Working Group will begin its 40th session next month under the new presidency of His Excellency, the Permanent Representative of Argentina. And I want to take this opportunity to congratulate the Ambassador of Argentina and the members of the Bureau on their election for next year's Bureau. As I've said in my remarks in the Council on their election last week, we are a resilient Council. We thrived in 2021, and we should continue to thrive in 2022 and onwards. But please allow me to end on a personal note. This has been the first year that the presidency has been held by a small island developing state, and also by a small island developing state in the Pacific. And it has been a matter of great pride for my region and also for SIDS everywhere that we have had this opportunity. I think the fact that we did have this opportunity is a testament to the value of multilateralism to the world. If small countries can take leadership of such a crucial and important body, such as the Human Rights Council, and if we can do so and we can oversee discussions on such important matters for SIDS and for the Pacific, such as climate change and environmental justice, then there is real hope that multilateralism in the future will address the needs of every country in the world, not just the powerful ones, and will also address the needs of every region and every community and every individual. This is the language of inclusiveness. And I feel very proud that the presidency of Fiji of the Human Rights Council in this year has demonstrated in such a significant way to the value of multilateralism to the world. So on that note, I will stop and I will hand over back to Rolando, and I'm happy to take any questions and comments from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you ever so much, Ambassador Khan, for those comments. I should note that the press release on the appointments that Ambassador Khan just mentioned is in your inbox, hopefully. If not, do contact me afterwards. So we have a question from Laurent Sierra of Swiss News Agency. If we can unmute Laurent, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rolando. Thank you for taking my question. First, you mentioned again the increasing burden of work for the council, and there are more and more also intersessional discussions. So are we reaching a limit of what the council can absorb in terms of work? And secondly, what will you bring with you from this experience as president of the Human Rights Council to your next position at the ICC? Thank you.
Thank you. Two very, very important questions, I think, for the Council, but also for me as an individual. If I may take the first, the work of the Council has been increasing. This is very clear. And yesterday, the Universal Rights Group launched a report on the 2021 Human Rights Council sessions, which really looked at the way that our workload has increased. But we have to remember that we cannot increase our work willy-nilly. This is a state-driven process. We are subject to concerns of economic work and ensuring that we are efficient in the way that we work. So our work programs have been accompanied by an efficiency process, which was launched 3 presidents ago, and which means really that we must make visible the way in which our workload is growing and ensure that we are efficient and effective. One of the civil society organizations has said to me, it's not just about efficiency. We have to ensure that we do not embrace efficiency at the cost of effectiveness. And I think that was a very valid and important point. So I think it's important that we continue with the efficiency process, that we guard against duplication of work, particularly in the creation of new mandates. I think it's very important that we look at the way that we conduct our debates to ensure that we are making the best use of the time that is allocated to the Council. I think at all times, many people don't realize, but at all times we have to ensure that we have interpreters who are able to support us in the work that we do. So our partnership with UNOG is absolutely crucial because it's UNOG's support that allows the Human Rights Council to continue. And in addition to the COVID-19 restrictions, which require, of course, physical distancing, and which have seen this shift to a greater virtual conversation, we have, of course, the renovations of the Palais des Nations. So all of these are challenges, and I think it's very important that we do not grow in an uncontrolled way, willy-nilly, such that we really shoot ourselves in the foot. So important that we continue to be effective, but we do so efficiently, and that we continue to keep our eye on how we're growing, how effective we are, and how efficiently we are able to approach our work. So I think it's an important issue, but I can assure you that the processes of the Council already keep an eye on how efficient we are, so we do not grow to such an extent that we're not able to effectively manage our work. On the second issue of my new role next year of a deputy prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. May I say, first of all, what an honor it is for me personally, but also, again, for my country and for my region. This is the first time that a Pacific Islander has taken a senior position at the Office of the Prosecutor in the International Criminal Court, and it is a matter of great pride and achievement for my entire region. It's also a testament to the inclusiveness of the ICC and the fact that the ICC processors in the Assembly of States Parties are very aware of the need that the court should be geographically represented. On the experiences of the Human Rights Council and how that will help me in the future, I think the Human Rights Council work this year and my leadership of it this year has been a life lesson. I have learned so much from working with states, with civil society, with you, members of the media, and very importantly, with my own team about the processes of the Council, how important it is to be inclusive, to listen more than I speak. I should be listening, and also to ensure that we approach the work of the Council in a balanced manner. I think balance has been a key to the work that we've been doing here, because every state has its own priorities in the Council. Every state wants to showcase a particular human rights issue, but it is a multilateral organization, and of course the Council is a state-driven process. And so managing those expectations has really taken a great deal of patience this year. And I'm very glad that I went through it, because I think it has been extremely good for me as a person, and it has prepared me well for the work of the OTP next year. So what do we take into the OTP, the Office of the Prosecutor, for next year? I think, again, the importance and the value of multilateralism. The International Criminal Court is not just a court, it's a multilateral international institution, and it is guided by the Assembly of States Parties. So important, I think, to ensure that there is an inclusive process. Also important that we really focus on implementation on the ground at the domestic level for states, just as we have a strong focus in the Human Rights Council, particularly through the Universal Periodic Review process, to really implement human rights on the ground. So is it important in the ICC to strengthen justice systems on the ground and to ensure that the first recourse for war crimes and crimes against humanity should be domestic legal systems, and the ICC should be a court of last resort. And of course, that is already in the Rome Statute, and I think very well known by everyone, that it is very important to build local systems of justice. So I have learned that. I have learned the value of the strength of systems on the ground, and I have learned the value of the prevention agenda of the Human Rights Council, that if the Council acts quickly and uses its processes for building capacity and uses the technical support that is available in the OHCHR, then countries can really deal with situations which are of concern quickly, using the existing mechanisms. And in that, at the top of the list, I must talk a little bit about special procedures. The mandate holders have an important role, because not only do they speak about thematic matters to do with their particular rights, they have shown great flexibility in adapting their reports to the Council, given the current emergencies of the time. So many of the mandate holders have addressed COVID-19 and the way that COVID-19 has impacted on the delivery of their rights. And also importantly for the special procedures is the process is an equalizer. They visit countries, and it doesn't matter whether these countries are developing or developed, and in what region they visit. They will report on those countries to the Council, and they will make recommendations for improvement for every country. And I think that process is an equalizer and demonstrates that every single country in the world is on a journey for the implementation of rights, and we all need to work harder at improving our own domestic situations. So I think those are some of the lessons that I take away this year. Thank you so much, and over to you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Valuable lessons indeed. We have questions now from Nick of the New York Times, and then Stephanie of Reuters. Go ahead, Nick.
Yes, thank you for taking my question and for this briefing. Alongside the Council's successes that you've mentioned, we also had the rather conspicuous failure on Yemen. and the failure to extend that particular mandate. I'm wondering, at a time when we're seeing greater, the world sort of slipping back to Cold War era polarization, I wonder whether you see concerns here about the ability of countries with political muscle and financial muscle to stifle the ability of the Council to address human rights issues and concerns.
Thank you very much for that, that question and the comment. On Yemen, of course, whether or not the resolution succeeded or failed on the Human Rights Council ultimately is in the hands of the member states of the Council. And there was a voting process, and of course the resolution failed. But we also have to remember that that was not the only resolution on Yemen, nor was that particular mandate the only mandate on Yemen. So there are already existing other mechanisms in relation to Yemen which continue. And in addition to that, of course, the work of the OHCHR continues in relation to Yemen. And I think we can all agree that there is a continuing need to keep our eye on Yemen and to really work very hard to ensure that we deal effectively with human rights violations there. On the issue of polarization, the Human Rights Council is not, although it's a very good thing to have consensus, of course, in every resolution, but consensus is not the only alternative. And ultimately, where there is a very strong disagreement on a particular resolution, the Council can take a vote. And in this, I think, this is one of the greatest strengths of the Council, that we cannot stifle debate because one country or two countries think that a particular resolution should not be passed. Ultimately, we can take a vote. And we know, for instance, there has been a very difficult, vexed conversation around environmental justice over the years. It's taken 30 years for there to be this strong support for a resolution creating the right to a healthy environment, for instance. It hasn't been easy, but ultimately we took a vote. And the overwhelming majority of the countries on the Council voted in favor. So I have to say this, that I don't think ultimately that a few countries can stifle the debate. There is no power of veto in the Human Rights Council, and it is a majority-driven process if there is no consensus. The last thing I want to say about the views expressed on the Council, and I've said this before, and I apologize if you've heard this before too many times, but we don't have a consensus on how human rights should be implemented, or even what human rights are more important than others around the world. The people of the world do not agree on what human rights are important and should be the subject of a resolution on the Council. So I don't know why we should expect the countries on the Council to agree. So in those circumstances, what we should expect is a diversity of views on the Council. And I think that's a matter to be celebrated. I think the Council provides a platform where we all, with our very different views about priorities, about strengths and weaknesses of the human rights fabric of our regions and our countries, have an opportunity to express ourselves in the most robust terms. And in particular, it's been valuable, especially to hear from civil society about the failings of human rights systems around the world and how the Council can do better. So I think as long as we celebrate that diversity of views, and as long as the Council provides a platform where those views can be expressed freely and without fear of reprisals or intimidation, particularly for NGOs, then I think we should celebrate that diversity. And I think the more we speak, the more likely it is that we will find common ground on the development of human rights elsewhere. Many call me a dangerous optimist on this particular issue, but I do believe that the discussions at the Council over the years have reached some sort of agreement on a number of important issues. And as I've said, climate change and the environment are two examples. So I don't think that differences of opinion are necessarily a bad thing for the Council. I just want to say that what is important is that those who preside over the discussions of the Council, the Presidency and the Bureau, continue to ensure that there is a safe space at the Council for the most robust views to be expressed. And I have said repeatedly over the year that I take reprisals and intimidation of civil society, particularly, very seriously indeed. And I have acted very quickly to prevent such reprisals from happening. Thank you very much, and over to you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Stephanie Nebehay of Reuters. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Rolando. Ambassador, I wondered, since you referred earlier to the importance of domestic mechanisms and that justice and domestic mechanisms working, I wondered if in the context of the Philippines, which, as you know, has had very heavy death toll from the so-called war on drugs, in which Madame Bachelet's office has reported on extensively. I wonder in that context whether you think that the decision recently by the ICC to allow to defer its own investigation in favor of a domestic mechanism was the right one.
So I do have to be careful here, because I am now on my way to the International Criminal Court, and decisions on deferrals, which situations should be prioritized and opened. Of course, these are matters for the Chief Prosecutor, and I will be working under the leadership of the Chief Prosecutor. The second thing is that I don't want to be presumptuous. I haven't started there yet. So I'm very careful about making comments when the situation concerned is still unknown to me. As a member of the Office of the Prosecutor. So I will not venture into making a comment about that particular situation. But I can say this about the Philippines, that the Philippines here in the Council has been a very outspoken and a very interested state, which continuously has made very constructive recommendations about how the Council can strengthen its processes, be more efficient, and ensure that we are not duplicating effort. So we hear the Philippines' voices repeatedly, and I am very pleased that the Philippines continues to acknowledge the importance of the Council and continues to participate in our debates. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador. Peter Kenny.
Thanks for taking my question. My name is Peter Kenny. I work for All Africa Global Media and the Anadolu Agency. Ambassador Khan, at some of the sessions where human rights issues have been raised, countries that are opposed to them being raised accuse the Council of being politicized. And it's a bit of a confusing term, because I think all the issues that are raised in the Council pertain to political issues. Would you like to comment on this? Thank you.
Well, I think it's very, very hard to divorce the political multilateral world with human rights conversations at the Council. Even the process of electing members of the Human Rights Council is a political process. It's done by the General Assembly. So I would say that on the raising of issues in the Council, I have seen an incremental approach by states, remembering that this is a state-driven process, but also that civil society often, repeatedly, raises concerns in the Council with very good effect. I think civil society has a very important role in raising important issues. But it is incremental. First, the issue is raised in a debate. Perhaps there might be a joint statement by several countries which have concerns. But before a matter becomes a resolution, because after all, we have to remember that resolutions and decisions have to be adopted by the Council before the Council takes action. So prior to the taking of action, this is only part of the debate. And it's up to countries when they want to raise an issue in a debate, how they want to do it, of course, within the bounds of procedure. But before a matter is actually adopted as a resolution, there is a very important process of, first of all, the socialization of the issue and of the resolution, the negotiations process, which can be an anxious process, and then lastly, of course, the presentation of the resolution in the Council, and then the voting process. And most sponsors of resolutions seek to have cross-regional support, because it's very important for them that this should not be seen as an initiative which is driven only by one region. So in all of this, Politics is at the center of this. Of course, concern for human rights is what drives this process. But of course, the politics of getting cross-regional support is crucial. And I do want to say one more thing, that I have seen increasingly the small states participating very effectively in this negotiations process. So that, I think, depolarizes the discussions on the Council. This is less going to be a battle between developed and developing countries. We have this buffer zone, if you like, of small countries which don't necessarily fall into any particular category and which are interested in the role of the Council as furthering human rights goals. And to that end, I think one of the most important mechanisms of the Council is the SIDS LDC's Trust Fund, because it has the effect of empowering smaller countries, countries with fewer resources, many of which do not have a delegation here in Geneva, to really understand how the Council works, to participate in the negotiations, and to speak, and to really ensure that what is important for those smaller countries is in fact reflected in the resolutions and the texts eventually which are adopted. And I think that it is this buffer zone of smaller countries, of SIDS and LDCs, eventually which is going to help to shape the conversation. And it is going to depoliticize this situation. In order to do that, we have to empower the smaller countries. And for instance, organizations within the UN like UNITA, which works very hard to train smaller countries in negotiation skills, I think we haven't spoken enough about that. So I think a good question for the Human Rights Council is, how do we give a greater voice for small countries, LDCs and SIDS? How do we bring them here to Geneva? How do we ensure that they are qualitatively empowered to participate in the negotiations so that their voices help to shape the resolutions? And I think then we're going to get a much better, well-rounded discussion, resolutions which are less likely to be politicized, and a council which is relevant, as I've said earlier, to every part of the world. These are my very firm views about the role of smaller countries. Over to you.
Thank you for that important message, Ambassador. We have a follow-up from Nick of the New York Times. If we can unmute Nick. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, sorry to pester you like this, but you mentioned your firm position against reprisals. We see reprisals against human rights defenders increasing generally around the world. Were you called on to take a lot of action on the issue of reprisals during your presidency, without necessarily asking you to name names? Could you just say something about the interventions you have had to make? And are they increasing in number? Are we on a trajectory of increasing reprisals or diminishing reprisals in the context of the Council? And if it's diminishing, I wonder to what extent that's the influence of increasingly virtual proceedings. Thank you.
So in relation to the Council itself, we did not have large numbers of complaints this year. In fact, the clear trajectory this year was that the complaints were decreasing. Of course, there's two ways of reading that. One is that there were fewer reprisals. The other is that there were fewer complaints, although the reprisals continued. So I think really it's important to look at the situation in the Council, also in the context of what's happening in the UN system generally. And for that, the reports to the Council by the ASG on human rights in New York has been very valuable, because she, and I will not tire you with the details of that, but her report is really very helpful indeed, because it does show patterns of reprisals. She did not find an increased number of reports in relation to the Human Rights Council either. It could be the fact that we have moved to a virtual platform, as you suggest. It is really possible that virtual communications have freed NGOs, civil society groups, and have allowed them to treat the Council as being more accessible and to create a safe space for that communication. I think that is a real possibility, but I have not analyzed whether or not that might be so. I just find, as a matter of really of some relief, that there were fewer complaints this year to the Human Rights Council than there had been in previous years. We do deal with them in a way which I call soft diplomacy, where we call in the ambassador of the country concerned, which is the country against which there is a complaint, and then I express my concerns and wish that such behavior should not be repeated, and ask how this particular country is going to remedy what has happened. So, as I've said, that immediately has had a very good effect in the sense that we haven't had any repeats of such complaint from the NGO concerned, nor has there been a further complaint against the country concerned. So in that sense, I see this as a successful process. I have followed the example of previous presidents in following this process, but we cannot rule out that where a country does not cooperate with the president or does not offer remedial action, that the matter will be made public. That is certainly not ruled out, and it could happen in the future where there is a lack of cooperation. So I think that's my view on reprisals. Of course, I would like to believe that the fact that I have repeatedly warned member states and observer states throughout the year that I take reprisals very, very seriously indeed, and I will act in a very decisive manner, that might be a reason why we haven't had so many complaints, but I think that's an egotistical reason. I think it's more likely to be the virtual platform on which we are communicating. Over to you, Rolando.
Thank you again, Ambassador. I don't see any more little yellow hands popping up on my screen, which means the press conference has come to an end. On that note, I just wanted to say it's been an immense privilege working with you and your team, Ambassador Khan, and I would say we have been infected by your dangerous optimism, which is certainly not a bad thing these days. Best of luck in your new job as Deputy Prosecutor at the ICC, and hope to see you soon. Thank you very much, and thank you all for joining us.
Thank you so
Have a good
much.
day.
Thank you very much.